All right. And welcome to Get Outdoors with Hook Outdoors. Today I am joined by a longtime friend and local outdoorsman, angler, trapper, bushmaster, fisherman, you name it, he does it. He is a Buckeye transplant from here, but we won't hold that. We won't hold that against him. And his name is Dwayne Brewer, and I am pleased to call him my friend and overjoyed to have him on my podcast today. Dwayne, if you could give us just a little bit of background about your outdoor experience, and then we will take off and we will discuss some of the high points of fall deer season here in eastern Kentucky.
Well, like you said, Dan, I'm from Central Ohio. Been down here about 20 years now. Started hunting when I was 12 years old, and I'm breathing on 60 real hard and real heavy. A lot of my experience comes from being outdoors with my grandfather and my dad. A lot of stuff I do is self-taught, so I don't claim to be anything professional. I'm just going to talk about what I have done over the years to bring me success and to have fun while I've been in the outdoors. I love to see youngins in the outdoors and try to get as many kids out as we can. So that's our goal, to make sure that we keep active hunters in to make sure that we can keep this resource alive and useful for many generations. So, but as you said, I love the outdoors. I do everything outside. So
good deal. Well, I guess let's just jump right into it. As summer kindly fades away and we're getting pretty deep into fall, how has the behavior of deer changed over the last, we'll say, 2 months or so from their summertime patterns to now?
Well, we're well into our deer season now, as it comes in pretty early down here. It does in most states now, but a lot of times when you got your summer patterns set up, a lot of people like to come into Kentucky early for our season because it gives you a rare chance to get a velvet buck. Not every place has that opportunity. But you'll find your deer transitioning from your fields and your open areas in your summer patterns, late summer patterns, early fall patterns. You can drive down the road and see them out just about any given time of the day if you've got crop fields. You know, here in eastern Kentucky, we don't have as many crop fields as what we had in Ohio, obviously. But where they're at, you'll see the deer activity in those. And as the days begin to change and fall begins to move on, your does will still remain up in pretty good groups, but your bucks will start to break off. And they're already in the little bachelor groups, but they'll start sparring with each other. They'll start trying to rub the velvet off their horns. They'll start building strength, and they'll start going more to out of the summer pattern, which a lot of times is daylight time, to they'll start becoming more nocturnal and start running a whole lot more than they'll stay out into the field. So
would you
cover a lot more area with their than they can with their eyes, so that's what they start doing.
Would you call that, like, I guess, though, what you're talking about there, I guess, for lack of better words, you're talking about kind of the pre-rut or the beginning stages of rut where their hormones and things are starting to kick in a little bit. They're still more concerned with feeding, but they're starting to get more interested in the females, and they start putting out a few signs, like a few scrapes and a few rubs and that sort of thing.
Definitely. Like I say, as the summer progresses a little bit, you know, that velvet's going to have to come off the antlers. So if you're in the woods much, you'll start seeing little rubs here and there, and that's just to go ahead and get that velvet off. But you got to understand that the whole time they're practicing all of this stuff, they're building up neck muscles, they're building up strength, and then, you know, all the testosterone is beginning to build up in them. So you're going to start seeing more rubs from time to time, and you're going to start seeing them more concentrated. You're going to start seeing them closer together. You're going to start seeing a lot more scrapes on the ground. And when you start seeing these scrapes, it's just it's part of the activity. I don't really get excited about the sign too much until I start seeing what I would consider the big scrapes, or the main scrapes, and you'll have several deer coming into those areas and congregating around those. And you know, it's not just the bucks that use those. It's a not only a visual for the deer and the rubs, but the olfactory factor of the scent checking of these scrapes. You'll have I've seen fawns, I've seen does, I've seen bucks, all in these uh, major scrapes that they make. Not just the ones that's here and there, but you'll find some that are pretty good sized scrapes, and the whole herd will come in and check and use those. So
Mm-hmm.
yes,
Mm-hmm.
the bucks are definitely starting to fill their oats, and they're wanting to. They're becoming very aggressive. They become aggressive with each other. They begin to spar with each other, and it kind of breaks them up into their areas, and they begin to set their boundaries with
Mm-hmm.
each other and
Mm-hmm.
dominate. And
Mm-hmm.
so,
So after the pre-rut, kind of what you're talking about is they start to get just more aggressive, and if anything, especially when they get from that in that seeking and chasing phase, where they just really start to get stupid, and the estrus cycle kicks in the does, and these bucks, they just they just don't pay any attention to the world around them, and they'll, and a lot of times you can pick them off, I guess, especially if you're in a travel corridor and that sort of thing, because they kindly, as they get on into the different phases of rut, they lose interest in feeding and that kind of thing, and they literally have a one-track mind. What are some ideas you have as far as being able to take a buck, once they get into that phase? I mean, is it more of a thing of rattling and, grunting and drawing them in, almost like you would calling in a tom turkey, if you will? Or is there other things that tend to work better once they get into that phase?
I have, like I said, I've hunted for a long time, and I have used calling over the years, and calling does work. My son just recently had a buck that he called in. It came in,
Mm-hmm.
and it came in so fast that he really wasn't prepared for it. And I have found that when it works, it works, and when it
Right.
doesn't, they just ignore you. And if you've got a buck and he's got a hot doe with him,
Mm-hmm.
it no matter a call, and no, you can call until you're literally passed out, and it ain't going to bother him. But
Mm-hmm.
there
Mm-hmm.
are times where I will do what's called blind calling. I don't know what's in the area. I can't see what's in the area. I haven't seen anything. And rattling is a really good way to find out. A lot of times you'll get a buck to show himself, because you mentioned turkeys. Everything in the woods likes a good fight. You
Mm-hmm.
want to you get something's attention, you
Mm-hmm.
start a fight,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
that's what rattling want to represent. So a lot of times that will definitely call them in. You've got different things like the bleat cans and the deer grunts, and there's all types of calls that you can use. Fawn calls for early parts of the season,
Mm-hmm.
bucks for rut. Your estrus can calls will call in does, fawns, and bucks.
Mm-hmm.
So calling is a good way to locate deer, and it's also a good way to stop deer if you have a deer that's moving through your area that you're trying to get a shot on.
Right. Now, what about, like, I guess your actual hunting setup? Do you have pretty much a consistent setup as far as a geographical location, a ground blind versus a tree stand, depending on, the time of year you're hunting, or or like your son, I mean, do you like change depending on what you think those deers are doing?
You mentioned travel corridors are what we try to find, and those
Mm-hmm.
may vary from time to time. But I have found over the years, I've had some tree stands in some areas for 20 years,
Mm-hmm.
and find a decent deer in that area. He likes it for a reason. There's good cover, there's good food, there's good water,
Mm-hmm.
everything. So you can take a deer off of that corridor, and it may be a year or two, but sooner or later you're going to have the biggest bucks in that area back in that area again. There's a
Mm-hmm.
reason that they like there. As
Mm-hmm.
far as the blinds and the stands go, it varies from time to time. You can't always get into an area that's got trees to be able to climb.
Right.
Um, Used to we set nothing but tree stands. Now it's a big thing is the saddles. My son likes to use a saddle. I'm to the point where I don't climb a lot anymore, so I'm pretty much ground bound. So I'm learning. It's a whole new ball game of trying to get face to face with deer. They we all know that their senses are very good. Their sense of
Oh yeah.
smell is
Yeah.
it's hard to beat. Beat
Yeah.
their ears, you can beat their eyes, but it's hard to beat their nose.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I try to look for the sign. Try to look for it. This year, it's been really a lot easier to especially during the early part of the season, to zero in on the deer because we've had such a drought in our area. It's been so dry that people don't realize how much water a deer will consume, or a buck will consume in a
Mm-hmm.
day's time. So if
Mm-hmm.
you can set up a good water source and have the wind in your direction and have food and cover there close by,
Mm-hmm.
it's a good spot to set up on. So it
Mm-hmm.
has been this year.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of different things to look for. Hard edges, soft edges, and what I consider hard edges, going from, say, a weed field or a crop field to wood line is a hard edge to me. What
Mm-hmm.
I consider edges like CPR fields to a crop edge. You're coming from bedding into a feeding
Mm-hmm.
area. So hard edges and soft edges work really, really well too as
Mm-hmm.
far as you're transitioning through those areas on a regular basis.
Do you think you were talking about water and everything? And I was reading an article the other day about how long, basically like, it was talking about water versus food versus air, and how long you can survive without each of them. And I think that translates over to the hunting world also. Do you think like a water source is a bigger factor than a food source? You know, do the deer or wildlife, for that matter, of about any sort? Do you think water, is their most sought after thing on a regular basis? Like everything else, they can go a few days without eating, but if they don't get water pretty regular every day, they're just not going to be around long.
I agree with that 100%. And I often tease, it's so much different when we moved down here to pattern deer than what it was from Central Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
Central Ohio, you've got a wood patch. You may have a 1 acre wood plot, and you've got 10 acres, 100 acres of corn, and then another wood plot. And you would just set up in those wood plots, and those deer would basically come to you, very easy to pattern. I've teased about here that if a deer got in the woods in Ashland, if he drove, if he went the right direction, he could go from Ashland to Lexington and never come out of the woods. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
there's
yeah.
always going to be a food source there, but the
Mm-hmm.
water is scarce. And
Mm-hmm.
this year I have seen creeks dry up that I've never seen dry up before.
Mm-hmm.
There's always been pockets of water, but I think water is very important. I think a lot of times with a lot of the guys that I've hunted with over the years, it's overlooked, and I can't say that I've done it myself because I'm concentrating on bedding, I'm concentrating on food,
Mm-hmm.
concentrating on all the things that I normally concentrate on. Where this year, water would seem to be the key to the early activity anyway.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. I think in these super dry years like this, you go back in the woods where, you could always find a little hole of water in a little branch, up a holler and stuff, and it's not there this year. It's just not. I mean, a little bit maybe after one of these little rains we've had, but as far as on a consistent basis, there's no water in the woods consistently, and I think that's why where we are at here around Cave Run Lake, I think that's why I'm seeing more deer along 801 and such, and around the boat ramps and just around the lake in general, just because there's no water back in the woods. And you were talking about how if a deer knew the way, they could go from Ashland to Lexington and never leave the woods. And that's kindly on a smaller scale than that. From where I'm at here at Scotts Creek, you can head in a northerly direction and basically go through the woods for 10 or 12 miles and go all the way to Moorhead, and you cross one or two little hiking trails, and that's it. There's no roads, no structures. There's not even a power line right away or anything through there. So, that is true. And versus, I was up in around Wilmington, Ohio, like up towards where you're from there, and that is true. You'll have a 2 or 3 acre patch of woods, and then you might have a 500 acre corn or bean field all the way around it. So yeah, it is a different game down here compared to up there where you're from.
Yeah, definitely harder to pattern deer here.
Um, and talking about the food and everything like that. If you were hunting based on a food source, what is your, I guess, for lack of a better term, what is your go-to as far as a food source that you're looking for? And I know these guys around here, put out corn and this and all these blocks and everything, but if you don't have your own plot of land and you have to hunt the public land, like here in the Boone Forest, where, you're not going to pack a 50-pound bag of corn or have a block out. And I don't even know if it's legal to do that. I'll have to check on the game laws for that. But barring having any kind of added supplement, if you will, if you're just out what I would call rough hunting in the woods, and you're depending on what Mother Nature's offering to pattern your deer, what are you looking for?
The two things that I would key in on without food plots or without any agriculture or added, like you said, bait piles or stuff. The two things that you're going to look for is mast and browse.
Mm-hmm.
And those are both just a little bit different. And the deer down here, they live on a lot of mast. That's going to be your fruit, your nuts, berries, apples, acorns is nuts I'm talking about. Your browse is going to be more like your shrubs and your young trees, etc. And they won't really start on that until the weather gets really bad and all the acorns are gone. But the number one thing to key in on right now, and I'm telling you, I'm just come out of the woods this weekend doing muzzleloading. What the deer are keying in on is the acorns, and not just acorns, but the white oak acorns. We have lots of tannins in the acorn mast, and the white acorns have a lot less tannin. It's just the chemical that's in them that makes them very bitter, makes them hard to resist and nasty. But they'll go through the white acorns, the white oaks first. If you can find a good oak ridge, I'll go into a new patch of woods and I'll just kind of look at the lay of the land. And when I start seeing rises, I'll start walking towards the tops of those and looking for the white acorns and see how much mast is laying up under them. If it's a hot tree, you can tell because the ground will be tore up, and it don't take long. You can go in there and scout for just a few minutes and stand in an area, and if the acorns falling, it's going to sound like rain. They're going to be coming down really hard. They're going to be coming down really fast, especially on a windy day. The deer are going to hear those, and it's just like if you've ever heard a feeder go off and that corn starts hitting that piece of metal and slinging it all over the place. Well, them deer are listening to them acorns come down too, so they'll concentrate on those and stay on those until they're gone. And it's hard to find a good hot tree. You just got to put a little bit of time in it. That's what they're really after right now. Them white oaks or the money right now.
You're out in the woods every year. Is there more or less acorns and that kind of thing? I know some years are better than others.
Yeah, I worked at one of the local campgrounds in the Daniel Boone, and while I was there, I kept an eye on the acorns all the time because our campgrounds were full of trees. There were certain ones that I would watch every year, and you would have some years of bumper crops, and you'd have other years there were just hardly anything on the ground. They're going to go for the white oaks over the red oaks, and some years the red oaks produced more than the white oaks did. Another thing that I will watch a lot of times too, if I'm in an area that I don't have a chance to scout a whole lot of it, but I'm finding deer sign and want to set up in there, I'll start watching the squirrels in the area. I'll watch and see where they. Another thing to watch is blue jays. Blue jays really, really get into the trees, and they'll start shaking them limbs and knocking the acorns out. And a lot of times just use the local wildlife to help you figure out which trees are really producing, because they're going to go to those trees first and then work themselves down through the food chain as they can. So even though I get to scout, I stop at an area and I can see, a half an acre away from me. I'm noticing a lot of activity from squirrels and blue jays, so that gives me an opportunity when I get down to go check that out and see if that tree's hotter than what I'm on. So, there's definitely years that we have a lot more crops than others. And I'm telling the guys, I've told my son this, I've told a lot of different people. I've had people say, "Well, man, they're not hitting my bait pile. They're not hitting my bait pile." And if you've got a bait pile set up and they've got acorns, they prefer. And there'll be some guys that probably disagree with me on this, but I just. Here's what I have seen is they will prefer those acorns over the bait piles anytime. The bait piles are legal here in the state, and I have hunted over bait piles. I'm not going to pretend that I haven't, because I have, but walking through the woods and all of a sudden there's 100 pounds of corn there. To the deer, it's not natural. They realize, they know something's up. So they're going to go to the most comfort in the most secure area that they can, and they feel really secure on those ridges with those acorns.
Yeah, you were talking about that it's a more natural thing, and I mean, deer to me are sharp like that. I think they they pick up on things that are just out of place. And I also think too. I think like the acorns, it's just again, it's just like human beings. They recommend humans to eat so many servings of nuts every day, and I think the deer just naturally gravitate toward that because I don't know. I mean, I'm assuming they know it's good for them and everything, but acorns are a high energy type food. And so yeah, I just think I think they know that it's what they're supposed to eat, and I do think like if there's nothing else around, the corn and the blocks and the sweet feed and stuff, yeah, they'll get after that too. But I think if they have a choice as far as something natural that they're going to eat, I just think that's what they go for. That's just what I think too. And I think a lot of it depends on the time of year. Now you get up into your late season deer hunting when maybe the food sources aren't as plentiful as they are now. Then yeah, the corn piles and the baited areas might come into play, even if you don't have any active stuff out. They realize that there has been something there, and they may even cruise through and to see if it's there anyway.
Yeah, they have a tendency on the bait piles. What I have watched is, it's just like any kid. You give kid something new, something candy or something, they're going to run right in on it. So, and I've had years that I've hunted on, and if you've got a doe with a couple fawns, them fawns will come in there. I mean, they just run in there like they ain't got a lick of sense because they don't. And you got a big doe, she'll stand back on the edge and just outside of bow range, or she will hide herself out of gun range to where she really doesn't provide anything. And them youngins run right in there, and they cause all kinds of problems for mom. But as the years go on, or as the season goes on, they need to get away from the proteins and go to more fats and carbohydrates to start building body fat. So they're always know what they need. It's all instinctive, and we all know that they do what they do very well, and they do need something. A lot of times it's how many times you rode down the road and you've seen a squirrel in the middle of the road and it's like, man, get out of the way, but that salt tastes so good to him.
Oh yeah.
Down a little crack in the road that he would just rather give up his life than to get out of the way to let go of the salt. Some of them are a necessity, but they have different places that they go to get them too. So there's nothing that we provide for them that they need. It's all out there for them, and a lot of what we provide just it makes it simple for them. It's convenient for them, so that's the reason that it works so well for them.
That's the exact word I was thinking of. I think even in the animal kingdom, convenience can play a role in their behavior. If they don't have to, if I put a salt block up in the woods behind my barn, versus them having to hunt around and find it somewhere, eventually they'll get to where, oh, well, hey, we don't even have to look for it. We know there's going to be a block down here in the head of this hollow, and that's where we'll go. And, it's, the convenience can eventually be very detrimental to their health come fall if they're not careful, so to speak.
Exactly.
Now, I'd like to talk some about bedding and all that. Does bedding figure into your hunting pattern, or is it, or do you go more by scrapes and travel corridors and all like that, or do you try to figure out where they're bedding and then where they go to from where they're bedding, that sort of thing? Does bedding figure into your hunting strategy in the fall?
Well, everything you just said there, rubs, scrapes, bedding, and the corridors all kind of tying together, Dan. And when you first get into hunting, it takes a little while to tie it all together. If you know an area really, really well, I've hunted on areas that are close to you, and once you do it a few times, you can figure out where bedding areas are at. And if you've went into an area and you've never hunted before, what I start looking for is I'll look for rubs, not just new rubs, but old rubs too. And a lot of times what I'll try to find out is which side of the tree they're on, and then walk backwards. If I find scrapes say I'm facing a tree, it's on the left side of the tree, I start walking backwards, and all the scrapes are on that same side of the tree. If I walk it back, it's going to walk me back to either food course, going to walk me back to bedding.
Mm-hmm.
And then I will then at that time, whether it's a morning or an evening, scrape or rub line. And it just takes a little bit of time to figure that out because most of the time they're going to come from bedding to feeding in the evening. So most of your scrapes are going to come, or most of your rubs will be on the side of the tree that the bedding's on, going
Right.
out, vice versa. So what I try to do is stay out of the bedding area, but set up in an area that gives me plenty of time
Mm-hmm.
to get a shot. And what I'm saying is, a lot of times you'll have a buck that'll come out to a field edge, but he won't come out till after dark. So
Mm-hmm.
I can't stand up on that field edge and expect to get a shot at him. I may have to go 100 or 200 yards back in towards the bedding and set up in an area where I'll still have a chance at daylight. Now he'll be on his feet coming towards the field, but usually he will not go into that field till well after dark. So
Mm-hmm.
if you're going to get a chance at him, you're going to have to get back between the feed and the bed in order to get that shot.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So it's been in my limited deer hunting experience. Seems like as far as bedding goes, deers are super cautious. So they're going to try to bed somewhere that is in a close proximity to a food source. But they're going to also try to bed somewhere where they can be facing, I guess what you'd say, downwind, so they can pick up the scent of either a hunter or a predator, and and where they, I guess, where they'll bed somewhere where the prevailing wind is always at their is where they're downwind, that way they can pick up on things, because like you said back earlier, you can fool their ears and their eyes to a point, but it's very difficult to trick their nose. So I think one thing that I've always tried to do is set up downwind, of an area that I know, where they are bedding at, so I can maybe get lucky and pick one off every now and then. So that's just kind of my 2 cents as far as the bedding about at least this time of year anyway.
Of what we've got down here that we didn't have so much up home, we have a lot of flat area up there.
Oh, yeah.
During the week of gun season up there one year, as I was traveling back and forth to work each day, there was a little an oak tree that took about 3 guys to hug, probably a 200-year oak tree in the middle of this picked bean field.
Mm-hmm.
And there was probably 10 foot of vegetation around this, all the way around this tree, and it was just out there by itself, just an island in the field. And every day when I come home about 4 o'clock, that buck would be up on his feet, and he would be within just a few feet of that oak tree. He stayed there during that whole week of gun season. What he had was more, he didn't have so much the wind in his face there because he had, acres around him, but he could see in every direction, so he had a way to escape. Down here, what we find is these hillsides, the thermals play a big part in the way that we hunt. We know that your thermals are going to rise in the morning, they're going to come up the hill and go up, and in the evening as it cools down, that cool air comes down and it drops your thermals down into the bottom. So if you're on a ridge, and you know that you got deer below you, then their thermals are going to play a big part in going down to where those deer can smell you, and it's going to bust your hunt. So these deer will like to lay on a little ways down the ridges, so where they can see, and then the wind comes down on them too. So they're playing every angle that they can. And these big bucks are really smart. They've got places set up like that, and downfalls. We have found them in some of the most unique areas, and they have busted us almost every time until we get a chance to get in and know the patterns a little bit better. It can be tricky. But I have also seen bucks walk in, especially if it's high pressure times of season, walk in and bed down in somebody's flower bed in their yard and stay there for 2 or 3 days. You never know they're theirs. But on the average, they'll like to lay where they can see plenty, and then make sure that the wind is in their favor as well. So yes, hunting downwind of any situation that you find, or any sign that you find, is a must, because like I said, I have beat their eyes, I have beat their ears, but I have never beat their nose. And we are very, very particular on the way that we hunt, being bow hunters. And I hunt traditional style. I hunt longbows and recurves for the most part. I've hunted about everything that you can hunt with, but I try to stay traditional. And you have to get the deer close to be able to
Mm-hmm.
shoot them, and
Mm-hmm.
I've never been able to beat their nose.
Okay. So I guess that, going back to kind of our original theme of things is how things change, from maybe their summer pattern and stuff. During the summer months, the deer aren't pressured, so they're more relaxed. So it's more about their comfort. So they may bed out in a more visible area just because maybe that they've got more airflow, more breeze and shade and that kind of stuff, and they don't have to worry about somebody, popping them off there. Whereas as it moves more into fall and they notice more human activity in the woods, and then it also gets into the breeding season, and that changes things too. Well, that changes their behavior as far as their bedding, where they're bedding, and just the terrain and stuff. And I think deers use terrain probably, as far as local wildlife here. I think the deer use terrain more than probably anything else here. I don't really. To me, I don't even think turkeys do, other than maybe hiding behind a tree or something because they're pretty sharp, or staying just out of gun range. But that's not so much about the terrain; is more about the nature of the turkey itself. But depending on the time of year and the situation and weather conditions and stuff, that dictates a lot as to where a deer will bed down as to would like a turkey. I think a turkey's activity, other than maybe in the spring when the gobblers start gobbling and stuff, but I do think the turkey activity, I don't know. It seems to me like it's pretty consistent. Maybe, I don't know. It just seems that way to me anyway. More so than deer.
Yeah, deer are lazy. I have watched them in open fields. I have seen them come in to feed 50 to 100 on state land in a field, and they can jump in anywhere they wanted to in this 100-acre field. But there was one gate, and there really wasn't even a gate; it was just an opening in the fence that was just in one of the far corners, and I would watch deer walk from one side of the field all the way around just to walk through that opening.
Mm-hmm.
Now that being said, the same thing happens here when you don't realize sometimes how many logging roads are in these fields or in these woods until you get in them and start hunting them. Well, these logging roads are a main highway for these deer until they become heavily pressured, and they will walk those on a regular basis and use those to their advantage. And they know where all of them are at. I have been in woods many times and not realized that I had walked by a logging road a number of times until I maybe see it with snow on, and everything looks completely different.
Mm-hmm.
You see buildings in the woods you didn't know was there. You see roads in the woods you didn't know was there. So the deer are lazy, and they're going to use those to their advantage, and they're going to stay pretty much in that same cycle until the pressure begins to build up on them. You get a lot of pressure in the area, yeah, they're going to start going to bed in places that you wouldn't normally find them.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to start, their activities will change a lot. So not much changes the turkey's activity. You get a tom turkey that's got a ridge that he likes, and he'll pretty much go to there, even if you bust him out of there every day. You start busting big bucks out of areas, you may get away with it once and he come back on you, but if you get a really big buck, there's a good chance that you'll bust him clean out of your area, or
Mm-hmm.
that he'll go nocturnal on you, and you won't get a chance to get a shot at him at all. So
Okay.
the human activity definitely changes the way that they do things for the most part.
I guess the last section I want to touch on is weather and the role it plays. Get your thoughts just on your from your own experience of how weather has affected your hunts, and what your strategy is, given if it's cold or hot, if temperatures are dropping, if they're rising, if it's a light rain or a heavy rain, wind, strong wind, cloudy, sunny, all that kind of stuff. I mean, is there any certain type of weather that you think, this is my time to hunt. This is the perfect conditions for me to hunt in?
Well, there are for me, and again, this is just on my experience of hunting, and it may be completely different for someone else. So
Mm-hmm.
we just came through a huge moon phase. It has been very full, very bright, very
Mm-hmm.
very. I went in Saturday morning to hunt over in Lewis County, and I hunt 4 or 5 counties here in this part of the country, and just happened to be in Lewis County this morning, and we were going in for a muzzleloading hunt. Didn't even need a flashlight to walk into where we were going. And I told my partner, I said, "I bet you the deer have been out on the field feeding all night long." And he said, "No, I doubt it." And well, we got done and come out to eat lunch that day. He had checked his camera, and we'd had deer on the field all night long. Not figured that much. Scientifically, they will say that moon phase doesn't really do a lot for deer activity. They'll
Mm-hmm.
say typically that the studies that they have shown doesn't show that weather has a big factor in the way that deer move. But
Mm-hmm.
for me, being out in the woods for so many years, you talked about me being an avid outdoorsman, avid fisherman. I love to fish. I'm a musky snob,
Mm-hmm.
and I love cast, low pressure days for fishing. But I have found over the years that the high pressure bluebird days seem to be the best for us to have deer up and moving on their feet. And getting them active. Talked about cold fronts. The
Mm-hmm.
day of a cold front is a good time to be in the woods, especially if it's been 85, 90 degrees, and all of a sudden you get a 50-degree day. It just feels good to go out and sit in the woods. But I also find that if you can get a cold front to run for 2 or 3 days, that second or third day after the cold front has come in usually produces more activity for me because now the deer are comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
They've reset their pattern. They know that it's going to stay cool, so they're enjoying being up and moving around too. And I'm sure for the animals, it probably feels good just to have the cool weather. But you
Yeah.
talked about rain as well, and we talked about turkey hunting earlier. Me and my son have realized very quickly that turkeys love the rain, and if you see a turkey in the rain at 8 o'clock in the morning, it just pretty much lets you know it's probably going to rain all day for us,
Mm-hmm.
and we will go hunt deer. I don't mind the drizzly days. I think that those are really good days, and that's completely opposite of what I said about the high pressure. But the nice just sprinkles and light rain, it does have a tendency to have the deer up and moving.
Do you
A
think
lot of times,
do you think that's because just a light rain like that will mask their scent, mask their noise, and they're kind of a nervous creature anyway, and it just makes them feel a little bit more secure as they're out, moving around, through during the day, because if you have a cool drizzly morning, I think those are a couple of conditions that will get deer out and on the move. That's just kind of my 2 cents about it.
it does seem to get them up and moving, but it's also you got to realize as a hunter that it helps us. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
yes, 85 degrees and dry, so everything you walked on, stepped on, broke and crunched and made all kinds of noise. But now I've got this wet floor in the forest that I can walk through and I can be quiet as well. And so it helps us in regards as far as being stealthy with the
Mm-hmm.
deer. So it gives us a little bit of advantage on what we had before the rain moved in. And
Mm-hmm.
deer are still going to do what deer do on rainy days. I mean, they still got to get up, they still got to move, they still got to feed. So they're doing the same things. And a lot of guys, are sadly enough, they're fair weather hunters.
Yeah.
And they're not going to be out on those days where you've got either even a little bit of rain, let alone a storm,
Mm-hmm.
and they're going to stay in the house. So, the deer, I think, begin to realize the patterns of humans as well. Dan, I just think that they know that on those kind of days that there's not going to be as many people out.
Mm-hmm.
They become programmed and educated to the same thing. It's like I'll be safe today because this is a day that I don't think we'll
Mm-hmm.
see many people.
Mm-hmm.
We try to take advantage of those days, unless it's just a really bad lightning storm or something. It's just pouring buckets. I think it's good to be out on drizzly days for turkey or deer, either one, because
Right.
they do move and they they. I think that as far as how it affects them, I don't know whether they just enjoy the coolness and the dampness or what it is, but they do have a tendency to move on those days, and we love to be in the woods at that time.
Um, one thing you're getting up to the time of year now where some areas have already had a light frost and everything, but I do think the frost is a has an effect on deer behavior because when bow season first starts, you've got a lot of greenery, and even now you're talking about muzzleloader season. Even now you still got greenery out there and a lot of vegetation deer can eat, but you take after your first hard frost. Well, that stuff's killed out, and even if it's not killed out, it changes the taste of it. It's just not appealing to them, and I think the deer do shift more to the to a hard mast, like the acorns and other nut crops and things like that, or in agriculture areas, they'll move more into ag crops like corn or beans or that sort of thing. So yeah, I do think that that a hard frost, I think there'll be really a pretty rapid change in at least their feeding behavior from that point on. And I think we don't really have that issue here. It'd be more so maybe up north where you're from. But I think on one end, I think snow would make a deer easier to track, but it would also change their movement and feeding habits because they don't want to expend a lot of energy just moving around because then they're burning up their fat reserves for winter, which could lead to a lot of trouble if they overdo themselves.
Yeah, that once all that heavy weather moves in, that's when the browse really becomes key to their feed. Because by this time, most of the acorns are already gone. There's a big competition in the acorn woods with deer, turkeys, squirrels, blue jays. I mean, sure. There's just a lot of animals that partake in those. And once that happens and you get especially ground covered with snow, and if it's on for very long at all, I mean, we've seen storms since I've lived down here with you all that'll put down for, a week or two at a time.
Oh, yeah.
And that's the browse. That's when the young branches and the new little shoots on these small trees and stuff, they'll start clipping them back and cutting on them pretty hard. And, I mean, there have been times where I've seen them in Ohio that are forced to go to bark and different things like that to survive. And at least they had that built into them to know how to do it. And they may thin out completely and lose a lot of weight over the winter, but a lot of them will come through those bad winters. And they've got the instinctive know how to do that. But it also, in those areas where you have a lot of crop fields and things like that, a lot of agriculture, they'll create a lot of crop damage for farmers if they don't get their fields in and have a tendency to lollygag sometimes. Most of the farmers I knew were pretty quick about getting their stuff in, but the ones that didn't, they paid for it because they hit pretty hard.
One thing that we hadn't talked about as far as and this has just more to do with the deer herd and its migration of itself. Predators, we don't really have like a big cat dealer here. There's some bobcats and stuff around, but now there is an increased number of coyotes and in the area now, more so than there was when I was a youngster. And I mean, I think that plays a part in the deer herd, whether they kill them or whether the deer just gravitate to a different area to get away from the crazy things. I mean, is that would you say I'm on track in my thinking there, or do you have a different point of view on that?
Excuse me. I think that the deer got pretty much they have a home range, and they like to stay in that home range. But the predators, such as the coyote, wild dogs, they will have a tendency to chase them. Some of that going on this weekend in muzzle season. They're obviously not going to stand and just let themselves be attacked. But it doesn't seem to run them out of the range, especially the does. They'll circle back into that safe zone and stay there. And it's in the area that I'm living at now, east of you a little bit, but I'm seeing, even though I'm hearing coyotes almost on a daily basis, about midnight every night, it seems like the rabbit population is growing. It seems like the squirrel population is up. And there's plenty of things for them to pick on other than the deer. But I think deer, especially during the fawning season, that's when it's the worst for our deer population, when they start getting into those to those fawns and easy catches for them. That's what really is going to kind of dictate where the does kind of gravitate to if they can't get away from this pack. If you have a pack come in and that has an exceptional large crop of pups here, then
Right.
it's going to create problems, and that will tend to move them a little bit out of their normal home range. But I'm glad we don't have more predators than what we have, because
Sure.
we have enough dealing with dogs and dealing with human interaction with deer to throw their pattern off as it is.
And I guess one more thing I want to just talk about for just a second, and I hadn't really thought about it till you mentioned it when you were talking about the feeding patterns and stuff. Is food competition, and it may not be such an issue this year because there seems to be a reasonable acorn crop, but those are cyclical, and you take in those years where, say, the nut crop is down, and it's not really that big a deal up where you're from because you got corn and bean fields and all like that. But you take these Highland deers, these Appalachian deers here, their whole diet is dependent on, especially once the greenery's gone, it's dependent on the nut crop. And now you have turkey and all sorts of creatures in the woods now that have always been here, but not in the numbers they are now. I mean, there's more raccoons now, more possums now, more skunks, more of everything, because there's no natural predators out there for those things, and I think it makes for more food competition. And I think that's what happened to the grouse in this area. I think that's the reason they got pushed out, is they're ground nesters, and they depend on the whatever kind of food source that the woods produce. I think the increase in the predators and the increase in the competition from like turkeys and the increase in the deer herd, I think that's what happened to the grouse. I think they just got shoved out by food competition. And what do you think about that as far as in relation to the deer anyway? Do you think there's more competition for the food sources now?
There's absolutely more competition for the food sources, and it's relatively easy to explain. And you cross species there from deer to several others, and going into grouse in particular. I'll go ahead and cross species from deer into turkey. I'm an avid turkey hunter, so I know the numbers are down in a lot of the counties in the state. Scientists will say that they're not too bad, but when you're used to seeing 50, 60 birds a day, and now you're seeing 5 or 10 birds a day, or even not even that, then it's not hard to figure out that something's going on. And I'm not against the biologists in our state. I think they do a wonderful job. But one of the problems that we have nowadays is, when we were younger, I'm a little bit older than you are, but I remember back when I was a kid and I began to get into the woods, that we were getting good money for pelts. We were getting good money for raccoons, for muskrats, for fox. And that put us in the woods, and we began to really do a lot of trapping, and we were really helping keep control of those populations. There's nobody that really traps anymore. There's still guys out there, don't get me wrong. I won't say it's completely an extinct activity, but it is so low now that our raccoons and possums, skunks, fox have all exploded to the point where there's not much trapping going on. So now everything that used to be kind of held at bay has exploded, and it is pushed things out. And so that has affected the turkey nest, because now we've got all of these animals raiding nests that used to, the numbers were down. We've got all the things doing the same thing for the grouse. And so everything that becomes overpopulated becomes a problem, because it knocks your food chain down. It changes the cycle of everything. So there's going to be more competition for the acorns, which is going to affect the deer, which is going to affect the squirrels, which is going to affect the turkeys. So it is a big, it's a domino effect. And if anything is out of balance in nature, it doesn't take long for it to show up and for people to realize, whether you're a scientist or a biologist or not. If you've just got a little bit of time in the woods, you don't even have to be an avid hunter to realize and understand things are out of balance. So, yeah, there's definitely more competition for certain types of food and certain types of mast than there used.
Okay. Well,
I
we're
think there's more hunters nowadays too. I think the numbers are down. Although
mm-hmm,
sometimes our numbers of deer are up. When you at the end of the year, I like to see how many deer were harvested.
mm-hmm.
I would definitely believe that the age of our hunters has increased tremendously over the last 25 years.
Oh yeah.
Uh, I started when I was 12 years old, and I'm almost 60 now.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got grandsons that are coming up that we're getting into the woods, but it seems like many years each year that the hunters are getting older and older and older. So
Oh yeah. Same thing in fishing. There's no replacement for these outdoorsmen. Not at the same levels anyway. You know.
no,
Well, we'll wrap this up here. I appreciate your taking the time to have a talk with me about this. Just kind of quick, like if for someone say that doesn't have any private land to hunt on and is wanting to come here where they have public land here in the Boone Forest in this northeastern part of Kentucky, what are just a handful of tips that you could give them, even naming specific areas to hunt in and what to look for when you're there?
I told you I'm a traditional hunter, so I like to hunt the old style.
Mm-hmm.
Zilpo area there at Cave Run is an awesome place to get back into. It doesn't have a whole lot of traffic. It doesn't have a whole lot of hunters. It does provide a lot of wildlife
Mm-hmm.
for the guys who like to get out and hunt that way for muzzle loading
Mm-hmm.
or for. It's a really good area. There's several places around the lake. I've hunted down around the Clay Lake boat ramp area.
Mm-hmm.
I've taken turkeys in that area, pulled down in there and called and had turkeys respond. You get off of the main road there. There's deer. There's everything in them areas. A lot of wildlife in Daniel Boone National Forest. My recommendation is if you find an area where people park and walk in, go twice as far as what you think you need to
Yeah.
go before you.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
Public land, but I grew up hunting public land in Ohio, and I hunt a lot of private land as well. But
Mm-hmm.
I have taken as many deer and as many turkey off public land as I have private land, so
Mm-hmm.
it can be done. There's a good opportunity to harvest some really nice animals on the public land.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have enough offerings here. These are white oak forest here, which you'll typically have plenty of resources for them to eat. A lot of the ridges here are covered in briar. Believe me, I've drug myself through them for seems like hours on end. There's even, I don't know the purpose of them. I don't know if they were built for fire prevention or for wildlife areas or whatever, but you can go back in the woods here probably a mile or two, and just out in the middle of nowhere there'll be basically a little pond. It may not be 20, 30 feet across, and it may not be 2 foot deep, but it's a pond with water in it. And, I think if, in our discussion there, I think if you find a water source and a food source and somewhere where you can get downwind of that, I think it would be a place to hunt. I just do. And I think there's good deer hunting here in the Boone Forest, especially this northeastern end. It's reasonably easy to get around in. You start getting on south in the Boone Forest, you get down in that gorge area and down in through there, and I mean, good gosh, it's straight up and down in that area. As far as even if you bagged a deer, I mean, it would be such a chore just to get it out. And I think this area here is more conducive to that. Granted, you're not allowed to take four-wheelers and things back in the woods, but a downhill drag and down a creek, you can be to a road reasonably quickly. But yeah, I think this area of the Boone Forest, it's not overhunted by any stretch. Opening day of gun season, you can drive up and down 801, and you just won't see any cars hardly, and that's a shame because the deer are pretty plentiful here. Because I've hit enough of them with my truck, so I know they're here. But
One of my favorite ways to get out, Dan, One of my favorite ways of scouting, if you guys don't get a whole lot of time to go in the woods, just take you a 22 or a shotgun and walk these old logging roads squirrel hunting. And while you're squirrel hunting, just look for sign.
Sure.
Or on the public land, they're used to people enough that it's harder to bump them out. I'm not going to say a trophy buck, but on the average, most of your deer are going to leave and come right back because they're used to having human activity there. So take advantage of some squirrel hunting. Take a few of the nut competition eaters out of the woods. Enjoy your time in the woods and scout while you're there.
All right. All right. Well, thank you, Dwayne. I appreciate the day and appreciate your time. And to everyone out there, just get outdoors with Hook Outdoors.